apparently I needed to be brought to my knees before I called out to the God of my understanding and said, okay. Obviously, there's something here I don't fully understand about life, about myself, about God, the understanding of which would change everything. What is it I don't understand? That's what started my conversation with God.
The episode you're about to watch has been republished. My podcast channel reaches a lot more people now, and there's certain episodes that have slipped under the radar, and I wanted to bring them up for your attention because I truly feel they are worth listening to. So please be sure to let me know what you think of this episode in the comments below. And of course, let's continue to connect. Let me know where you are in the world and where you're listening and tuning in from. I love reading it. It's amazing, isn't it, that we can do this? And the other thing I want to say as well is find out where we are if you want to put your spiritual boots on and come and join us at one of our 5-day retreats or one-day events around the world. Links are below as well if you want to find out more what we're up to. Much love from me. Enjoy. There we go. Neale, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Guy. It's lovely to be here.
I've been looking into your background over the last few days preparing for this podcast, Neale, and as I'm sure you've heard so many times, your work has certainly had an impact on my journey and my life with your books that you've written. And I was amazed to see that you've written 39 books, with the latest one being The God Solution. And you're generous enough to come on the podcast today and share some of your time as well. And I was just fascinated by what is it that continues to drive you and inspire you to be out there still doing what you do continuously. I find that very inspiring for myself at this moment in time in my journey in life as well.
Well, what drives me to do it, Guy, is my desire to place before as much of the world as I can the wonderful messages that I experienced myself having received in my conversations with God. Let me use a metaphor that could help you more immediately understand. If you won the lottery and you really had $5 billion, actually Australian dollars, not even American dollars, which makes it even better, would you hoard it all and put it in a bank? If you had 5 billion, what do you call your money? Pesos?
Here, dollars in Australia as well.
Oh, they are. I thought so. Okay. So if you had $5 billion, would you put it all in the bank and then walk down the street and pass by people on the street? Even if you saw someone on the sidewalk who clearly doesn't have any money at all and is trying to just get through the day, would you say, well, too bad, life's been kind of tough on you. Bye, have a good day, good luck? Or do you think you might reach into your pocket and share some of your $5 billion? Which do you think you would do?
Well, you'd want to share the messages or your money as far as wide as possible to help others.
Would you do it more than once? Would you keep on doing it every homeless person you find, or would you only do it once and then you'd say to the next person, nah, I already did it once today. Once is enough.
Exactly. Yeah.
So now you understand?
I do.
That's the answer to your question. I've been given a $5 billion gift, and there's no way in the world I'm not going to share it as often and with as many people as possible.
Yeah. In all honesty, Neale, I kind of feel that's what drives me to do this when I'm sharing off air, that once I had my own insights, there was a deeper desire, and it wasn't about me so much anymore, where a large part of my life it was kind of just focused on me, my problems and things, and by having a deeper insight to, I guess, who we are as a human being, and that we're not separate from each other, that there is a deeper connection. There's a desire then to want to, I guess, help others find that way within themselves as well.
Thank you for telling me that.
Yeah. I'm curious, Neale, that, and it's a word that I struggled with a long time, and that's the word God. And that word is in many of your book titles, and I thought it'd be a nice place to start the conversation. How do you define God? What does that mean to you? Because in my upbringing, in my world, it meant so many things to me, or I hadn't really studied it, so I didn't really understand it.
Well, I would say my way of defining God, I would say it's my understanding that God is the essential essence, the pure energy, the prime force. Maybe we'd call it the first cause, or the only substance, the cosmic consciousness. It is that essential essence demonstrating and expressing in a certain and particular way that produces an individuation of divinity. So the energy expresses in a way that generates individuations of divinity, or what could be called a singularization of the singularity. And there is no separation from who we are and from what is. I believe that we are to God as a wave is to the ocean, arising from it as an expression of it, and then receding back into the ocean when our individual expression is over. And we are never anything other than the ocean, simply in singular form. So I would say, it's my awareness that God has created a process. And that, in fact, one could even say that God is a process, an intricate system of singular energy vibrational emanations that produce the characteristics of all physical objects and that generate energy exchanges between those objects in a cause and effect relationship that creates events in the physical world. And you know what, Guy? It's my further understanding that all physical objects and life forms react to these vibrations that are being projected. And sentient beings have the ability to respond in a way that expresses their understanding, their knowing, and their choice about who they are and why they're here and how they choose to experience that in any given moment. So that's how I would describe my understanding of God.
I heard you quote, and I think I think you said there's 85% of people believe in a higher power. If
Yeah,
I'm not
surveys have been taking surveys have been taken over the past 10 years by anthropologists in all of the really locations of the world, in almost every country, the larger nations and even some of the smaller countries. And the anthropologists asked one single question, simple question: do you believe in a higher power? And do you know, 8 out of 10 people said yes. They may not agree on how they would define the higher power. They may not agree on what it wants, if anything, or what it does if it doesn't get what it wants. They may not agree on how to use that higher power. But almost everyone agrees that there is some sort of higher power in the cosmos that we call by a variety of names: God, Yahweh, Allah, whatever word feels comfortable to us. But most of us agree with that idea that there's something more going on here than meets the eye.
for sure. And what I find fascinating, or what I struggle with, I guess, in on my journey, is when I look out into the world and see what is going, I guess, happening, or at least portrayed through the media. And there's just a constant bombardment of struggles and fear, and this continuous divide for want of a better word. And if so many people truly believe there is something greater than us that holds the universe together, why aren't we as humans, I guess, honoring that and behaving more in harmony with something that's greater than us, as opposed to all this constant struggle?
It's a very good question. And I don't pretend to be able to answer the question for all of the 8 billion people on the earth. But collectively, I think collectively, Guy, we don't really understand who we are. I mean, as entities, as sentient beings. We're not clear about our true identity, nor are we clear about why we're here. If you walk down the street in anywhere in the world and ask people, the first 10 people you meet, take a little survey with a clipboard. Who are you and why are you here? Why do you think you're here on the earth? Most people will tell you, I haven't the foggiest idea. They may want to try to explain what they think they should be doing. I should be a doctor, or I was supposed to be a lawyer, or I'm supposed to be a podcast creator, or I'm supposed to be an author. But but when you ask them why, what is the fundamental purpose of life, of your life as a human being, most people would say, I haven't the foggiest idea. If I knew the answer to that, I'd be, the Pope or the head imam or the chief rabbi or whatever. I'd be writing, philosophy books, but I don't know the answer to that question. But that's why, in my observation, the world is the way it is, because we have no idea who we are and what we're doing here. Once we agree on who we are and what we're doing here, and once we agree that who we are is individuation of divinity, and what we're doing here is using the realm of the physical to demonstrate and to experience that, I think then we would probably have a new basis on which to make our decisions, our economic decisions, our political decisions, our social decisions, and our spiritual decisions. Because right now, the ethic, the moral ethic that we're using to make those decisions is an ethic of do whatever it takes to survive. We think that survival is a fundamental instinct. You know the irony of that, my friend Guy? The irony of thinking that survival is our fundamental instinct is that it is the one thing that's causing us to not survive, to make a difficult process of surviving. If anything is getting in the way of our continued survival, it's our idea that survival is the fundamental instinct. That's the irony.
So, just your views, there's so many questions you're firing in me right now, and one thought is how do we then get past that thought of survival instinct to then, because all I can think of in my own, like looking back in my own life, is there was a long time where I was in survival and I was feeling very separate from the world, and I've been able to identify my place within it. And through that, I guess, created a huge amount of, I guess, stresses and different emotions that never served me. And it kept me in that loop for some time. And it's, how do we, as people and as humans, start to then nurture to get beyond that, to start to come back into a much more collective approach to us, our communities, to our countries, to our planet?
By understanding, here we are again, by understanding who we are, and by abandoning our notion that who we are separate entities, separate from each other. Do I understand that you have a little child in your house?
I do, yes. She's just over 2 years old.
Okay, so you have a 2-year-old daughter.
Mm-hmm.
If she were running into traffic in a major intersection, she just kind of escaped, let go of your hand and ran out in front of a bus, would you jump in front of that bus in an attempt to save her life?
Of course, yes.
Well, you say, of course. But if survival were the fundamental instinct, you wouldn't do that because you'd realize you could die.
Mhm.
So clearly, survival is not the basic instinct. If you were walking down the street and you look to the left and, oh my gosh, the building's on fire. That building is on fire. Is anybody seeing that? And then you heard a baby's cry. What? Would you just say, well, I certainly hope somebody can find that baby before they burn to death. Gosh, I hope somebody can get here fast enough. I should probably call the fire department. Or would you, in fact, run into the building to see if you can find out where that baby is? Surveys have shown, anthropological studies have shown that 8 out of 10 people would, without even thinking about it, would simply run into the building to see if they could find where that crying is coming from and save that child. So they wouldn't think, gee, you know, if I run into that building, I could die in the next 20 minutes. See, they're not concerned about whether they're going to live 20 more years or 20 more minutes. They're concerned with how I'm going to live this next 20 minutes or this next 20 years. So we see that survival is not the fundamental instinct, because when the chips are down, when everything's on the line, most human beings, the vast majority of human beings, would not be serving survival as their fundamental instinct. So here's the solution I say to people. Consider every moment a burning building moment. What if you thought that every moment of your life was a burning building moment? Not to be overly dramatic about it, but to give yourself a sense of continuity, a context within which to create the process by which you make your decisions and choices about what you're going to do, think, and say next. What am I going to say next? If I wasn't trying to survive the moment, or at least get the better of this situation? What if it wasn't about any of that? What if I came here actually to do the best I can in expressing my divinity? Now, of course, if you don't believe that you're an aspect of divinity, the conversation is over. You have nothing further to discuss. Goodbye. I've enjoyed being on the program, and thanks for having me here. Bye-bye for now. Just kidding. I'm trying to tell you that the conversation's over if you don't believe.
I love the name that came up, Santa Claus.
Well, you got to have some fun.
Oh, totally. Brilliant. Without joy, what's it all for? I know that for sure. That's brilliant, Neale. So with all that in mind, and I think about my 2-year-old daughter and what everything you say resonates, because I often find when I get out of my own way, I reach the true aspect of myself, and when I live from that place and make choices from that place, my life is much more, it feels like a more harmonious flow. When I think about my daughter and the world ahead of her and what I'm leaving with, I guess what you see every day, conversations with people, are you optimistic as we lead into, as the next generations come through of our planet? I know these are big questions, but I just
no, they're big questions, but they're not too big for me. So see, Guy didn't think I'd be able to control his computer.
Yeah.
No, I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm not, a wide-eyed optimist who thinks that nothing bad could possibly happen, but I'm cautiously optimistic because I think that the conditions that have been created on our planet right now are perfect in terms of what's needed to really shake us awake, to really wake humanity up, and for us to say to ourselves and even to each other, well, wait a minute, I can't believe it. It was meant to be like this. This can't be the best we can do. Is this really the best we can do? And I've thought of writing a book with that title. Is this really the best we can do? And really challenging people to ask themselves that question. So I am cautiously optimistic. And I think that we are waking ourselves up. I think that our own actions, it happens in individual lives. I noticed that people tend to review their lives somewhere between 30 and 50, and usually closer to 50. But they look over their shoulder and they say, you know what? There's got to be something more going on. There's got to be something other than what I've been experiencing. And how I'm living my life can't be the best that I can do. And I'm not talking about material wealth or the importance of our job or how big the title is after our name or how many members of the opposite sex we've seduced or how much fun we're having. I'm not talking about that. When I say the best we can do, I mean, is this really the best person I have been able to create and to experience myself? And if there was another place that I could go, a different level that I could experience, a different level of who I am, what would that be? That's the question I looked at when I was around 50 years old. And that changed my whole life.
Did you, when you got to that point, because I really feel that there's always a tipping point, and more people seem to be coming to this to ask the bigger question, who am I? And on your journey, Neale, did you have to go through a lot of pain first to really start to ask that question? Would it have
I
come in?
had to. Yes, I had to.
Okay.
But I don't think it's necessary. So it's a really two-part answer. Neale, had to, because I'm really very stubborn. And I was closed-minded about a lot of things and, and small-minded about a lot of other things. I just did not have a large enough or broad enough overview. So I did have to struggle. I mean, I wound up living on the sidewalk.
Oh,
I
wow.
wound up, you may not know my history, but I wound up being forced by life to live on the street for a year, not for a couple of bad weeks or a tough month,
Wow.
but for a year. So I was what we call in America a street person, going from person to person on the sidewalk, my hand out, saying, gosh, anything could help. And since you have $6 billion, please reach into your, don't be like Guy who keeps it all to himself. Please give me some of your $6 billion, or even if all you have is $6, could I maybe have a little portion of that? Because I right now don't have any. So I lived that way for a year, sleeping on the ground outside. And I wound up getting a tent finally from my ex-wife, who said, okay, go just grab the tent out of the garage. So I did have a tent that kept me out of the rain, but it didn't keep me out of the cold. It's pretty cold even in a tent. So I lived that way for a year of my life. And because I was just, apparently I needed to be brought to my knees before I called out to the God of my understanding and said, okay. Obviously, there's something here I don't fully understand about life, about myself, about God, the understanding of which would change everything. What is it I don't understand? That's what started my conversation with God.
Incredible. I didn't know that, Neil. Thank you for sharing. I- When during that year, what I don't know what's the right how to frame the question, but what I guess kept you in that situation for a year? Was it anger? Was it frustration? Was it actually searching for something greater than yourself?
Well, I had nowhere to go. You let me explain to you briefly how I got there. First of all, my marriage fell apart. Well, that happens to a lot of people. So that was, it's sad, but it's not the tragedy of a lifetime. But then within 5 days, I actually lost my job. I was downsized. I didn't lose my job because I wasn't performing well. In fact, I loved my work, but they were having financial problems in the company, and they told me straight out, "Hey, you know what? Last person in, first person out. You have no seniority." So I lost my job within 5 days after losing my marriage. Now, if that weren't enough, life gave me the triple whammy. An older gentleman turned his car in front of me as I was driving slowly down the road, and he crashed right into me. And I broke my neck in the accident. I actually heard my neck snap. And when they took me to the hospital, they told me, and I'll never forget the wording on the report. I suffered a 3/4 inch avulsion fracture of the seventh cervical vertebrae posteriorly. In other words, I didn't have a hairline fracture. I had a 3/4 inch fracture of my neck. That's big enough to put a pencil through. When I was taken care of, the doctor looked at me and he said, 98% of the people who suffer this kind of injury, a broken neck of that severity, die, usually on the spot because of all sorts of spinal cord and nerve implications, nervous system implications. He said, you survived death. It's amazing. But not only that, you survived paralysis. You're not even paralyzed. So the doctor looked me square in the face and said, so, my friend, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? But you know what? I couldn't find a job anywhere. Nobody would hire me, Guy, because I was wearing this therapeutic. They fitted me, of course, with a collar, what they call a Philadelphia collar. And it's a therapeutic device that holds your head up because the doctor explained to me carefully that he said, imagine a basketball at the head of a pin. You have no support for your head. See, I want you to wear this collar for the next year or a year and a half. Do not take it off to shower, to sleep. I don't care what you do. Do not take this collar off until I tell you to. I had to wear it for over a year. Now, guess what? Nobody will hire you. I was out of work, but I went into one place after the other. I told them I'll do anything. I'll do any kind of work. I'll stock the shelves. It doesn't matter. Just give me something that I can do. So it wasn't my lack of willingness to work when you asked me how could I have been there for a year, but nobody would hire me. Finally, one person was at least honest with me. He said, Mr. Walsh, no one is going to hire you with that contraption on your neck. You're a walking insurance claim. You make one wrong move and you're going to re-injure yourself, and we're going to be paying your hospital bills for the next 5 years. Nobody's going to hire you until you're obviously in good physical condition. So I ran out of money and I got evicted from my apartment. I couldn't pay the rent and I was living on the street. I thought, okay, I can do this for 2 or 3 bad weeks. And I'll get a job someplace. But I couldn't get a job anywhere. A year went by that way. That's the answer to, did I stay out there because I was angry? Did I stay out there because I was upset? No, no, no. I stayed out there because I had no choice. Finally, after being out there for 2 weeks shy of a year, 50 weeks, on the street. I found a little weekend fill-in job. Just enough, earning just enough to get a little one-room apartment that some rich family had over the top of their garage on the back acreage. And I managed to sneak into that apartment and maybe spend a few dollars on the smallest amount of food I could eat. And I survived, but I was furious. How could these things have happened to me? The triple whammy, marriage, work, and health, all in the same 10-day period. So I was furious. I began writing a very angry letter to God. What do you want from me? What does it take to make life work? What have I done to deserve a life of such continuing struggle? Somebody tell me the rule. I'll play. I will play the game. Just give me the damn rule book. That's what created my conversation with God.
Wow. I'm speechless, man. I had no idea. Unbelievable.
Well, Hollywood made a movie of it, but clearly you haven't seen it. The movie was called Conversations with God, and they depicted all of this.
Wow. I'll be sure to watch that. That's incredible, Neale. So just to, I guess, bring it back to today, but so you were, I believe you wrote the book Handwritten, and
Well, yes, it wasn't a book. You see, I wasn't writing a book.
it was a letter.
And I never even thought anyone would ever see it. Guy, it wasn't my intention to produce something for public consumption. That was never my idea.
Mm-hmm.
I was simply having a middle of the night sacred experience. Simply writing my anger out on a yellow legal pad. What in the world is going on? And then I was receiving answers to my questions. I thought, well, that's an interesting thought. So I wrote it down. I kept a record of it. Then I asked another question, and then I received another answer. And before I knew it, I was involved in an on-paper dialogue, question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. And I kept a record of it because I thought, this is fascinating. But I never would have shown it to anybody else. It was a very private, very personal experience. In fact, I didn't want anyone to see it. And you know what? I realized if anyone ever even sees this yellow legal pad, they're going to think I'm crazy. Who am I writing to? Who am I getting answers to? They're going to call me crazy. They're going to commit me. As if everything else isn't bad enough, they're going to send me away. So I didn't want anyone to see it. But I was told in the dialogue at one point, you will make of this a book, and it will be accessed by many people. When I received that thought, which I wrote down by hand, like you said, it was all handwritten. When I received that thought, I dropped the pen, man. I thought, are you kidding me? No one's going to publish this book. I mean, no one's going to publish this as a book. No one's going to take my middle of the night handwritten notes and turn it into a book, for God's sake. There's a chance for 1 in a billion. I could just see the publisher saying to his staff, hold the presses, stop everything. I got a guy here who's talking to God. It's not going to happen. Nobody's going to publish it. So on a daring God, yeah, prove it. I sent it to a publisher. And the rest, as they say, is publishing history. The thing winds up selling 15 million copies in 37 languages in virtually every major country of the world, in their native language. You tell me what that's about. Well, what it's about is millions of people from Germany to Russia to Japan to Yugoslavia to even foreign countries like Oklahoma. That's a joke. Oklahoma is a state. But people everywhere, whatever their culture, were relating to the messages they found in that dialogue. And so the dialogue continued until I wound up with enough material to generate 9 dialogue books. And I stopped. Okay, enough.
Unbelievable.
Because the world started looking at me like I was maybe not crazy, but certainly different. I didn't want people to start thinking that I was somehow better than or more enlightened or somehow more spiritual. I had to do what I could to discontinue anyone, to discourage anyone from having such an idea about me. So I finally stopped producing the dialogue for public consumption.
Wow. What a journey. I'm speechless.
You're speechless. You should be me.
Yeah. Incredible. With the 9 books and the 39 books and the information that's out there that you've experienced through your own journey that you've shared with so many people, what is then, have you found the most common question or most common concern from people, common frustration within their own lives that you get on a regular basis? I'm curious to know.
Sure. Oh, I'm sorry. Somebody's having fun with us. One of your producers, one of your engineers is having fun with us. The question that I get asked really more than any other question is, what does it take to make life work? Okay, what is it that I don't understand here? It's just, and so but I was asked the exact same question. And not only am I asked that question, I asked God that question. So I give people who ask me that question the answer that I got. Neale, it's really very simple. You think your life is about you, and your life has nothing to do with you. It's about everyone whose life you touch and the way in which you touch it.
Coming back to the heart of it all. From that point, then there's a quote that I wrote, and from your book, The God Solution, the power of pure love. Is that what God is? Pure love?
Yes, in my understanding, that is what God is. But it's interesting because most people disagree. Most people who believe in God do not agree that God is pure love by the actual definition of pure love. Now, when I say that God is pure love in a lecture someplace, somebody in the audience usually will go in the back of the room and say, "Oh, Neale, come on. I've been standing here listening to you for 20 minutes for you to tell me that your great revelation is that God is love. Come on." We agree that many religions do not share the same dogmas or the same doctrines, but every religion on the earth believes that God is love. Nobody would disagree with that. Come on, you can do better than that. Well, I have to say to my friend in the back of the room, whoa. I didn't say God is love. I said God is pure love. And my friend in the back of the room will say, okay, what's the difference? Well, I have to say, guy, relax. Don't have to yell at me. I know you won't give your money away, but you don't have to yell at me. this guy is supposed to be laughing at my jokes. I actually signal to him when I'm actually joking. Okay. That was a joke. I mean, the joke about Guy. But the guy in the back of the room was not joking. He wanted to know what I meant. So I have to say to him, no. Pure love is a love that needs, expects, requires, and demands nothing in return. And that is the definition of God. But it's so theologically revolutionary that people who believe in God can't accept it. They can't embrace it. In fact, many tell me, you're going to hell, Neale. If you think that God doesn't need, expect, require, or demand anything in return for the good love he gives us, then you're going to hell. Because you're saying that God does not judge, condemn, or punish us. And he does. And he's going to judge, condemn, and punish you for saying that he doesn't. You are an instrument of the devil. So people have a hard time imagining a deity who commands and requires nothing from us. But you know, if you had a 6-month-old baby, have you ever held an infant in your arms?
Yes.
Yes?
Mm.
When you're holding that infant in your arms, 4 or 6-month-old baby, what do you demand or expect from it?
Nothing.
I see. So you know how to love purely as well. Well, if we could only learn how to express that kind of love to the person on the pillow next to us, or the person across the kitchen, or the person across the street, or the person across the world. If we could only love them as purely as we love a 6-month-old infant, we would change the world overnight.
Mm.
But of course, people say to me, oh, Neale, it's not a fair comparison. We don't expect anything from a 6-month-old baby because a 6-month-old baby has nothing to give us. I mean, they barely understand about life, but they can't, they don't know right from wrong or up from down. But people can't, who are mature and understand life, we have a right to expect things from them. Well, we may have a right to expect things from them, but do we have a need to? Now, if we are individuations of divinity, then we don't have a need to expect or demand anything from anyone, especially from the person on the pillow next to us who's spending the night with us. If I am sharing my life with another person and I'm saying that I love that person because of what that person can give me back, then I'm not loving that person at all. I'm loving this person, simply using that person as a way to do it. But if I love the other person simply because of who they are, because I find them glorious, magnificent, wonderful, beautiful, sensational, and totally lovable just the way they are, if that's why I love them, then I love them without needing or requiring, certainly without commanding anything in return. There is no I love you if. I love you if becomes I love you because of who you are, even if you give me nothing in return. Now, what's fascinating about that is people who love others that way are never left by anybody because we're all searching for that kind of unconditional love. and have not been able to find it. We can't even imagine a God who loves us that way. How would we expect to find it in another person? We can't even imagine a God who loves us that way. It's too good to be true. And when I said to God, how can I believe this? I can't believe that you don't want anything, that you don't demand anything of me. How can I believe that? It's too good to be true. And God said to me, sweetheart, if God can't be too good to be true, who can? So I have come to embrace the notion that God is pure love. And if I'm wrong, if I have misunderstood, if God loves us but will nevertheless judge us, condemn us, and punish us if we don't do what she wants, you got to do what he demands, or you're going to hell. If I'm wrong about that God would never do that, then I guess I'm going to hell, which is where all the interesting people are anyway.
No, everything you shared, Neale, just resonates so deeply. Just last question on that then. And why is it then as humans we are so scared to let go and be unconditional love? Why do we hold on to this notion that I need this, I need that?
I think it's because we're afraid. Because number one, we think that survival is the basic instinct,
Mhm.
and we're afraid.
The scared one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's who I am, the scared one. Because I think I need, certain things in order to survive, or at least in order to be happy. But my year on the street was one of the greatest gifts of my life. Because after a year out there, I realized how little I actually needed in order to be happy. Believe it or not, I had some days living in a homeless park when I was actually happy. I wake up in the morning and see the beautiful sky, or look up at night and see the beautiful stars, the canopy of stars, or whatever, and I might think, "Wow, doesn't get any better than this." And I realized how little I actually required in order to be okay with life. So now, anything even a little bit more than that is for me frosting on the cake. So I've been in a unique position to be able to see what's really required in order for me to be happy. But that's not something that most people have a chance to really experience. They may think they know it, philosophically, conceptually, but they do not know it experientially. So they're scared. So most people are afraid of life itself, what could happen. Yeah, but what if this? What if that? Oh my gosh, oh my gosh. So they're living on the edge of their worst nightmare. And that's why the world is the way it is, because most people are coming from fear,
Mm.
which is an acronym, really, FEAR, false evidence appearing real.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. It makes me think of a dear friend of mine. He many years ago he decided to build his own house by hand, and he ended up living in a small caravan, sitting outside, looking under the stars every night with a campfire. And it took him nearly 2 years to build a house, and he just lived very simply. And he said when it was finished, he actually struggled moving in because he was enjoying himself so much just in the
Yeah,
simplicity of it all.
that's a great story. That's a great story.
You know, it just reminds me of that for sure. Just wrapping up the podcast, Neale. What's next? Are you going to continue writing and continue getting the work out? Have you got any projects in the pipeline?
I will always be writing, I'm certain. If it's not a book, it'll at least be a major article or a pamphlet or some some message. So I will always be writing. In fact, I might even write a book called Art, Is This the Best We Can Do? And if I do write a book called Is This the Best We Can Do? I'm not sending you any royalties just because I had the idea on your program. But yeah, I'll always be writing something. And I'm online and I do a lot of podcasts. I do sometimes 5 or 6 podcasts in a week.
Wow.
So because there are hundreds, thousands out there, and people are asking me all the time if I would do their podcast. So I do. This is the third one I've done today, and sometimes I do, 5 or 6 over the weekend. So yeah, I'll always be doing something. Never gonna. You can't shut me up. Got too much I want to say, and I'm not going to stop saying it until they stop asking me to say it.
Yeah, amazing.
So there is no next particular project.
Yeah.
But I just gonna continue doing what I've been doing the last 27 years.
Yeah, incredible. And I certainly appreciate you giving me your time today and coming on my podcast. And I have no doubt everyone listening to this will take a lot from it today, Neale. So it's truly grateful. I got one last question I ask everyone on the show. And that is, with everything we've covered today, is there anything you'd like to leave the listeners to ponder on?
I've already done that. But when I said, your life is not about you, it's about everyone whose life you touch. But what I would invite people to ponder is this internal question. Whenever anything happens in your life, whatever it might be, maybe it's a moment of just a little bit of a disagreement with your spouse or your friend, or maybe it's a little bit of a financial setback, or maybe it's a wonderful event. Maybe you won the lottery and won many dollars, whether it's good, bad, or whatever. Whenever anything fairly significant happens in your life, invite yourself to ask yourself this question. What does this have to do with the agenda of my soul? Wait a minute. What does this have to do with the agenda of my soul? And what happens, Guy, is that places the event, whether it's a negative or a positive event, it places it into a context that allows our next thought, word, or action to emerge from a totally different place.
I'm going to write that down and make sure I see it. That's a perfect place to end this podcast today, Neale. And thank you so much. I got your website as neildonaldwalsh.com. I'll make sure all the show notes, the links are in the show notes as well for anyone that wants to continue to follow your work and get it. And of course, check out your books as well. And thank you so much for being on the show today, Neale. It's deeply appreciated.